Shall we'll get our meeting underway with some introductions. And just so you know, this meeting is being recorded on Zoom. I can see we've got 8 or 9 different folks who've connected to us on Zoom. They're all muted out right now, but if anyone on Zoom wants to be recognized, you can just use the hand, raise your hand, and we'll see if we can squeeze you into the flow of things in our meeting. My name is Kent Ackley, and I'm a member of the Monmouth Select Board. And as folks are filtering in, maybe the folks around this table could take a moment to introduce themselves, starting with Bill.
Bill Mann, I'm on the Monmouth Water Association.
Mary Turner, I'm the secretary of the association.
Old Elena Stott, I'm the president of the Water Association.
And Mary's going to be taking some minutes for us for this meeting.
Dick Robertson, treasurer, Monmouth Water. I'm Sean Doherty. I'm an environmental hydrogeologist for the Maine DEP.
And we're also joined by Dan Wells from the Winthrop Utilities District. And I can see online that we've got Mr. Kenny, who's representing the engineering firm that has done some design work, or at least feasibility work for us. I think there might be a couple more folks that could filter in. So let me start off with a quick overview of what we're gonna be looking to get done tonight. And it starts with a little bit of history on why, where we are in terms of this process. In 2018, folks from the DEP started doing some testing of their own around the state and for PFAS for the first time, and kind of understanding exactly how they would go about setting some safety standards for PFAS in drinking water, because up to that point, the standards were fairly high, and what was being thought of legislature was to lower the standards to a more protected level. So the results from those tests got published in 2021, and it came to the attention of the select board that one of those tests was from North Monmouth and was showing a very high result in the North Monmouth Village area. And it got us sort of scratching our heads thinking, maybe we need to be looking into this a little bit more. And so in 2022, the town did a couple of things. The select board did a couple of things. First, we tested what we could. We had some town property. The fire department has some property at the top of the hill there, so we had a test down there. Dan Wells helped us out with that. We discovered that test was above the threshold for safety that had been established by the state of Maine. And at that point, we had been given some one-time money from the federal government, ARPA funding, and made the decision to set aside a portion of that money to fund a feasibility study and testing process so that we could make sure that people who are living in North Monmouth, number one, have enough information to protect themselves immediately. And then number two, long-term, can have access to clean, affordable drinking water. So this is the result of that investment by the town. It's the first step of a very long process. This feasibility study that's been produced by the engineering firm, and Mr. Kenny will go into more details a little bit. That feasibility study has been published. It's, I'd say 99% done. There might be a few additional things that need to be added in, including public feedback. And that is part of why we are here today, is to get some feedback, answer a few questions, and help folks understand exactly how we take some steps forward in terms of addressing the problems that we've come across in North Monmouth. We'll go into more detail a little bit later on in the meeting. Let me just kind of outline how this meeting is going to flow from here. I figure first, we'd ask Mr. Kenny to present to us a little bit of information on the engineering feasibility study that his company has produced. Then we might hear from DEP about some of the testing that's gone on in North Monmouth and the extent to which we've got unsafe aquifer levels for drinking water. I think maybe Joel will talk a little bit about some of the needs for taking next steps in terms of moving from just a feasibility to actually coming up with a budget and figuring out how it is that infrastructure is going to get paid for, and coming up with a plan for implementing a long-term solution for the residents in North Monmouth. Next, we'll open the floor for questions and answers, and I hope you brought some. We like questions. Oh, and I'll give a quick update on terms of some of the recently moving parts at the state level. I had a chance to touch base with some folks in Augusta about some recent developments regarding PFAS that are beyond perhaps DEP's scope. So with that said, let me recognize Mr. Kenny. John, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, good evening.
There you go.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're coming in just fine.
Okay, great. Great, thank you. Nice to be here remotely. I apologize for not being there in person. I'm here with John Ashley. He's from our Vermont office. He's my supervisor in the Public Works group. He'll be joining us as well. I'm going to try to share my screen. Oh, I guess it says the host disabled that. So if I could share my screen, it can.
Yeah, let me see if I can help you out there.
Okay.
How's that working for you?
Nothing. Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay. Can
Excellent.
everybody see that screen?
Yep.
You can. Okay. So this is an overview of the infrastructure in blue. Right at the top here, you can see where the water source comes in from the Winthrop Utility District.
Oh, John, you might have to, sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Just the Du Bois and King screen is displayed right now. So you may have to advance and then come back.
Okay.
There you go. Now you're visible. Okay, that's good.
Okay. Now you can see the screen.
Yes.
1 second here. I can't really see what you're saying. Can you see it says Monmouth Water Association at the top?
No, it just disappeared again, John.
It did.
You're fine when you've been on there. Yep.
Okay.
That is visible to us.
All right, I'm gonna have to, I'll be facing off in a different direction here, unfortunately. Sorry about that. Unless I can share the different screen, but this is, it's up in the upper right-hand corner. That's coming down where the 12-inch water main comes down from Winthrop Utility District. It comes down to Main Street here, and then we have the existing 250,000 gallon storage tank up here, 8-inch water main in this area here. So basically that's the existing system. And what we were looking at, obviously this is the North Monmouth water, the area that we were studying. And one of the questions that we had is, can we serve the North Monmouth area without an additional storage tank in this area? And looking at water pressures and fire flows. And we did some modeling and found out that we could serve the storage tank is much higher than this area. So we checked the pressures and everything worked fine without an additional storage tank. This is the study area here. Route 202 on the bottom here, Old Lewiston Road, North Main Street coming up, New Street and Wilson Pond Road, and then Blaisdell Road along here. And when the 12-inch water main was put in on Route 202, there was connections were made across on the northerly side of Route 202 here, and then connections were put into place for future expansion at Old Lewiston Road here and at Blaisdell Road here. So it was put in with the plan of possibly extending water service in the North Monmouth area in the future. So what we did is tied into those connection points and ran 8-inch ductile water main in the area of blue that you can see. Tex Tech is here, Highland Terrace here. And basically we fire station is up here. And I think with the DEP presentation, they can discuss a little bit more where the high PFAS levels are located. But by tying into these connection points, which is planned for future extension, provides a nice loop system for water quality and water flows in the area. So we put the preliminary engineering report together for this and came up with some cost estimate for the project. And be glad to answer any questions that you may have. And John, if you have anything to add to this point.
No, that's a good overview. There's, there are a bunch of different sections of the report. There are some non-monetary factors that you consider and compare. Also, a number of required elements for the funding agencies that might fund this type of project, and those are all included in the preliminary engineering report.
Yeah, so that this report itself can be used then for, the funding agencies have the information that they need, the cost estimates and to look for, either grants or low interest loans.
So I've got a couple of questions.
Okay.
Can you elaborate for us on what the advantage is of using a loop system rather than just a dead end system?
Well, it provides for a better water quality. Usually when you have a dead end water system, you're not getting the water flow throughout the whole system that's being used. So, if you have just, ran it down here, then it would require more maintenance, and Dan could probably address that as well. The loop system, also from what we understood, there was interest on Blaisdell Road for future expansion build out of this area as well. And by having the water main extend around this part of North Monmouth, it would provide for that opportunity.
And
Excellent.
the loop design also helps with the hydraulics of the water system, giving you better pressure and flows than if it was a dead end, because when the demands are in different parts of the system, they'll be drawing from the closest point off of the existing water main instead of off of the one point that might be pretty far from where the water is being used. So it does help with the flows and pressures as well.
And then the other question is, Did I understand you properly that your analysis says we don't need a storage tank if this were if this were implemented, that an additional storage tank would not necessarily be a requirement?
That's correct. We ran a water, it's called WaterCat, a model that we inputted, we created for the whole system. And then we added this North Monmouth extension on there to look at pressures and flows. So if you're running a fire flow, we ran a fire flow on the system and then checked pressures, and the pressures were still above what was required for the drinking water program for minimum pressures in the system without any additional storage tank.
So all of the pressure that would be required for North Monmouth comes from the Monmouth Reservoir right down the street here?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got a question from the crowd here. Go ahead, sir.
So you've indicated that you allowed for, in case of fires, does that include if there were fires in Monmouth and in North Monmouth at the same time?
No, we modeled one fire flow of 500 gallons per minute on the system. And that's, and then we checked, when we had that one fire flow, then we looked at the pressures and flows without going on it.
I'm not a fireman, but I don't know if 500 is adequate. For example, if there was a large fire in North Monmouth, would that impact upon the rest of Monmouth in case of 500 gallons not being enough?
Well, John, do you have any? I believe
Well,
that's the
John met with the fire chief to review the fire flows. Tex Tech has its own fire protection system that draws off of, I believe, off of the, the pond there. And
Okay.
right.
I was wondering if you're including the pond as something that you probably would be using, which I would assume that you probably would, but I wasn't sure if you were expecting that what you're estimating is to take care of all the fires, but I know that there's water around there that could be accessed. Okay, thank you.
Right, yeah. And Tex Tech indicated that they would keep they'd be interested in connecting up to the new water system for drinking water, but they would keep their own fire protection system in place.
Other questions for the engineering folks? Thank you.
He said,
Hold on, one more question.
ductile pipe. And to me, ductile means cast iron or steel of some kind. Is that true? And if that's true, I'd like to know why, because most water systems elsewhere in other parts of the country are plastic green pipe.
That is definitely an option. We modeled ductile in our cost estimates, and Dan Wells kind of addressed that a little bit more, I believe. That's what was requested for the piping material.
and it's ductile iron.
Yeah, it's a ductile iron, a metal pipe versus a plastic pipe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You wanna give a footnote on that, Dan?
So the ductile iron pipe has some flexibility to it rather than a piece of PVC. PVC pipe has no flexibility. So you're getting these temperatures, you get a lot of ground movement, you gotta break a PVC pipe a lot easier than a ductile iron pipe will. Been doing this for a lot of years. And ductile seems to be what held up. I mean, I worked for an engineering firm before and we had to go up and actually fix an area that somebody put PVC pipes in and they busted it. They just wouldn't hold up to the pressure. So ductile is like the end all be all. Polyethylene. Now you're getting a different tooling that we don't have. So that's the other thing. You switch brands of pipe, we don't have the tooling to deal with it. So now we've got
A maintenance issue.
$50,000, $100,000 for material.
All right. So what I'm hearing you say is to some degree, this recommendation was made to match the existing.
The metal ones wear out after years, they have to be replaced. The whole system has to be dug up again.
Well, the ductile iron pipe has a concrete lining, so that doesn't have as much abuse on it as like a sewer pipe would. So you're just getting clean water flowing through it. So you don't get the actual wear and tear on the inside of the pipes.
Some of the newer ones, we're ripping them up out of bath ironwork this summer.
I can't speak to that. I don't know what they are. They steel pipes or they ductile iron pipes? Steel pipes, yeah, those are different. Those are gonna corrode at a different rate. The ductile holds up pretty good with the concrete lining on the inside. That's all that touches the water. The steel or the iron doesn't touch the water.
Now, Monmouth system today, that's all ductile iron, correct?
It's ductile and cast iron.
And cast, okay, and that was put in the sixties, right, early sixties.
66 was most of the cast iron, and then an additional part was put in 71. And then we've done some upgrades since then. What's breaking here is the cast iron. You guys get a break on Main Street, it's cast iron pipe. Not ductile.
So if I understand you saying that the plastic one is gonna be moving,
Ground's gonna move.
so
At
then
that
the,
hydraulic pressure,
right, so then the concrete, the ones on the concrete line, that doesn't move?
it will take a little bit of abuse, believe it or not, the concrete will not spall and break off. We're talking a little bit of movement, we're not talking an earthquake. Earthquake's gonna take it all out. I mean, just a little bit of movement with frost or
Or these aren't very far enough down so that you don't have the issue with frost or frost.
burying them 5.5 feet down. You're still, there were years that you had frost down that. Jackhammer and frost around a pipe to fix it, I've done it. Makes headlines.
All right, other questions relating to the engineering of the design of the infrastructure? Yes,
Are these pipes run down the road or on the side of the roads?
that's a good question.
They're in the right of way, but they're on the side of the road.
And they're not on the paved area, they're not in the paved area of the road?
It will depend on the location.
Hmm.
And
There's a sanitary service on North Main as well, so we'd try to work around the sanitary and some storm drain as well.
that's
I
tricky
think-
part, right, then
yeah.
you-
Sorry. There may be some areas where there's just not enough width to keep it off of the road. And then in those sections, what we prefer to do is keep it centered on half of one lane of the road. So if it has to be in the road, you're only closing down one lane during construction. But other than that, we can stay off on the shoulder where we can, but there are definitely some pretty tightly constrained areas where there are utilities in the way, or just not enough shoulder to be off the road. And that's what we would do in those areas, is be down the center of one lane.
Good question.
Side of the road.
Well, it's gonna have to be opposite. It's gonna have to be like minimum 10 feet horizontal difference between where the sanitary sewer is. And the sanitary sewer covers all the roads that you're going to build a water line in, except for the ways open. Yeah, it's gonna be pretty much the opposite side of it.
Opposite side of the sanitary, wherever the sanitary is, that's where this is
I
not.
don't know where that's at. All I'm thinking about is we just put a new sidewalk up there, I have to dig it all.
But we haven't
We
gone to that. I don't believe we've gone to that level of detail with this study, so we'll figure that part out. And certainly we're not going to destroy anything that we've just made a big investment in if we can. If we can avoid it, we will.
You're gonna have to go through the sidewalk for your service.
Sure, of course you will. Yeah. Yeah, there's no doubt that there will be some intrusion on, during a construction process. As with any construction process. But that's a whole nother level of engineering.
It is. The next step would be to survey the area and and a finer level of design. This is more, what you see on the screen is more, just basically, this is where the water main's going to go, specifically in that right of way. That'll be the next step.
Right. Okay, I think that concludes our engineering discussion. How about we move on to Sean with DEP? Sean, you want to talk to us a little bit about the findings from DEP?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for having me this evening. In case anybody didn't catch it the first time around, my name's Sean Doherty and I'm a hydrogeologist at the Maine Department of Environmental Protection. I'm just going to give you a real brief overview of some work that's been done in this same general area as the waterline extension project here in North Monmouth, where we've been looking at PFAS in drinking water supply wells. So, well, I'd love to tell you. So PFAS is short for, this isn't going to help, but per and polyfluoroalkylated substances, right? So maybe folks have heard them referred to in the media as forever chemicals. A lot of people hear that. They're different. They're a class of chemicals, and there's quite a few of them, several thousand, that are related to nonstick coatings and things and different industrial applications, all sorts of things. The trouble is they're real handy, right? So we use them in everything. And in the last handful of years or so, we've started to realize that, well, they're everywhere and they might be an issue. So we've been investigating them around the state. And in particular, here in North Monmouth. So Maine has an interim drinking water standard that we've set in place, and that's what we use to evaluate risks to drinking water supplies, and that's what we've based our decision making here on for this investigation. And so the department approached Tech and asked them to initiate an investigation to look at PFAS at their facility. And Tech was great. They took that on. They took the lead along with their environmental consultant. And that's resulted in sampling quite a number of water supply wells. I brought this map here. Apologies to folks online. I'm not sure you're really going to be able to see this very well, but you know,
Actually, Sean, if I can just share with folks online
yeah,
that a similar map is available in the link that we will take you to the engineering study, feasibility study, and this is Appendix E.
Oh,
So they have an electronic copy available to them, and if people have questions, they can reach out and we'll get them a shorter version of that.
great. No, that's excellent. Yeah, so I'd welcome people to take a look at that map too, if you have that available now or at some point in the future. And I guess really, the intent be showing this map really is more, there's a lot of detail here, but really I just want to show you the area where we've been conducting these investigations. And so for reference, we've got North Main Street here. Here's Wilson Pond Road. We've got Old Lewiston Road and then 202 down in here. And for reference, the Tech facility is located kind of in this open area right here. So to date, it's primarily Tech and their environmental consultant have sampled 52 private drinking water supplies in the area. Those are shown with these little dots, these little circles here. And of those 52 sampled, 26 have had water treatment systems installed because they are above that main PFAS interim standard that we use as a benchmark for whether the drinking water is safe or not. So roughly a half have gotten the water treatment systems. With the highest kind of concentrations or the concentrated areas where we see the PFAS chemicals in this general area, along North Main Street and then looping up along New Street here. So that's sort of where we're at right now. You know, we've looked at most of the properties in the area that have private drinking water supply wells. The only ones that we think we've missed are those that haven't responded to the request to sample, or in cases where they've refused samples. So generally, this phase of investigation is wrapping up at this point. They submitted a report to the department just recently. I haven't had a chance to fully review it, so it's possible that we'd ask them to step out in a couple other directions. But overall, I think I generally agree that they've done a fairly thorough job of characterizing the PFAS issues in this area and have responded by providing filter systems. I guess what's really pertinent to this meeting and this discussion that we're having today is that, you know, bringing public water through this area would be a real benefit to those people that do have the impaired drinking water, right? These treatment systems are fairly expensive to install and quite expensive to maintain over a long term. So public water would really be a benefit.
Ready for questions?
Sure, absolutely. Yes, yeah.
PFAS chemicals found in gasoline.
PFAS chemicals are not found in gasoline. No, fortunately, they're not. There
was a gas station in North Monmouth in 1970.
Oh, interesting.
Right around the pond, right around the church.
In that general area right there,
It was
huh?
in Texaco, I can't remember exactly.
Interesting. I honestly can't tell you if that's one we've investigated in the past, not one that I've done personally, but there's a whole bunch of other meetings at the department that do this work, and we may have looked into that one. We've done a lot of work in the area relative to Tex-Tech, not just on PFAS, but to other chemicals that have been used at that facility in the past too. So we've done quite a lot of investigation in the area. I'm not aware that we found gasoline issues, so.
Where is the source of the PFAS contamination originating from?
Well, in this particular area, we actually haven't stepped out to look at that yet. You know, our initial response here was that we wanted to make sure that people had safe drinking water. So we kind of went right at the private water supply wells. We want to identify any issues there, take care of those issues. And you're absolutely right. That's our likely next step. We haven't had those discussions yet with Tex-Tech, but I think everyone sort of understands that the next move for us here is to start looking at potential sources.
Yeah, because it seems strange, or at least to me it does, is that the fire station, which is in a higher elevation than Tex-Tech,
Yeah.
and looking at the hydrogeology, why is it flowing up to the fire station? So there must be another contamination source besides Tex-Tech.
Well, it's interesting, and it's something we have to investigate. I'm not willing to speculate or point fingers at this point, but firefighting foams are a potential source of PFAS. I'm not saying that that's the case here, but potential. It's something we'll look at. Yeah, I do.
The salt up there too. PFAS can be picked up all over the place and dumped on one spot.
Yeah, well, you know, maybe it's something we'll look at. It's not a source that we've seen in the past, but you know, it's might be something we think about.
I had a water test done back in 2006. And I still got the results at home well. Would that have shown up back then?
PFAS?
Yeah, if it would have been in the water when we tested back then, was that something they were looking for back then?
No, it really isn't. And even today, if you had like a standard residential well test, it's very unlikely that PFAS would be included as part of that test. It's something that gets looked at specifically. And I guess I'm not going to say it's rare because we're doing it all over the place these days, but it would be unusual to include it in a regular residential well test.
Do all test agencies now look for PFAS, that are testing private wells or public water supplies?
I'm not, so I should say that the public water supplies, right? Like the municipal water supplies are looking at that. They're testing for PFAS and looking at it very carefully and making sure that their water supplies are safe. if we're talking about residential, no, right? A lot of.
If you asked for it, they would.
Absolutely, right, yeah, it's not inexpensive. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's come down. When we first started doing this, it was $500 or $600 a test, and it's come down, but it's still quite expensive. But.
So what you found in other areas like in the state, is that mostly due to sludge that's been spread in that type of process, as opposed to, in this particular case, it may be attributable to one or an industry as opposed to dumping of, I should say dumping, spreading sludge.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're right. So one of the big things we're focusing on here in state is our use of municipal wastewater sludge as fertilizer on farm fields, right? Unfortunately, there's PFAS associated with a lot of that material. Maybe people have seen information in the news about the Fairfield area having significant issues there. We've been branching out. We've been tasked by the legislature to look at the entire state, believe it or not. It's 700 some odd fields that we need to go out and take a look at relative to PFAS. And so that's the sludge spreading that you've heard about. In this case, it's not outside of the realm of possibility, and we haven't looked into it completely yet, but if there may be fields in this area where sludge spreading occurred, and that would be a potential source that we would look at during that next stage where we think about where this PFAS is coming from.
So kind of just to follow up with that, would Highmore Farms be one of those that could have used this sludge in the past?
Perhaps, it's easy to find out. There's good documentation of that. I would guess no, but I don't know. I don't know the answer.
Well, they talk in terms of one of the things that they do is that they developed for China when they had the chickens had their Chinese flu in order to be able to compost those chickens, and so therefore they didn't have to burn them, and so which we were doing over here. So I'm just thinking that they're very much into a compost type process, and so therefore I don't know what specifically. So I guess then I turn to the town and saying, is that something that because of that, would you be looking at suggesting that they may be looking at the farms and asking the farms if there's something that they use and something we should be concerned about? And I hate to bring this up, is that then maybe there's beyond the North Monmouth, there may be other issues that you need to be addressing with regards to this. And is this something that it becomes a little larger than what we're talking about?
I can actually address that. I am also on the Conservation Commission for the town. For any farms who wanted to spread sludge, they had to go through an application process. One farm in Monmouth who applied, it was denied.
Okay, so you feel fairly comfortable then? No, would that also pertain to Highmore Farms?
John, aren't there maps out there that shows where sludge was spread in this
Yes,
area?
there are. I was just going to
Yeah.
say that. We have very good documentation
Right.
about this, because absolutely, as Joel mentioned, that's an application process that a farm had to go through and receive an application from the state. So we understand pretty well where it was spread and where it wasn't. And then in regard to this particular area we're talking about here, this investigation that we've done looking at PFAS in these drinking water wells in this area, we're starting to feel pretty confident that we're kind of getting our arms around the problem there. As we step out to these areas outside at the edges, we're getting clean wells, and we think that we're starting to understand. We've got, I guess, I don't want to say localized because it's a pretty big area, but we're starting to understand the extents of the contamination, and it looks like it is in this area right here that we're looking at.
It would seem to me that this would be the likely source of the contamination issue in the village that we're dealing with in its immediate surrounding area. To me, it would seem to me that the only other likely source would be previous industries, such as canneries and so forth. North Monmouth is an industrial area.
Yes.
I think people would be surprised how much industry there has been in North Monmouth.
Oh, of course.
But for the purposes of this discussion, I think it almost be assumed that that's highly with fire retardant aircraft materials being tennis balls and so on.
So I think it's important for us to do two things. First, to say what we know, and for now, we haven't officially done the investigation that would determine who created the problem. I think it's also important, actually, it's three things. It's also important to acknowledge that there are hundreds of families in North Monmouth that rely on Tex Tech as an employer, and that there are 50 to 60 homes in North Monmouth that rely on Tex Tech for either bottled water or a filtration system that's been installed into their home at on Tex Tech's dime.
Yes, I'm not even suggesting that we
Yeah.
focus on who's responsible for the chemicals.
That's way above our pay grade.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but I do think it's important to understand that whatever happened, when many of these chemicals were being used in manufacturing in general, it was the 1950s and the 1960s, and there was no sewer system in North Monmouth. There was zero sewer system. So, let's move on from responsibility and talk a little bit about, now that we're getting an understanding of the footprint of the problem.
Mhm.
How do we move forward? And one of the issues that I wanted to bring up was this flow pump that is been operating, and you mentioned was recently optimized by Tex Tech.
Correct, yeah.
Because that is the highest test in the battery of tests that have been run, and there's, you know, probably 70 to 100 tests that we're looking at. This one particular test jumps out at us as like a record-setting test of 12,000 something parts per billion. And it's a flow pump. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And
Talk a little bit about that.
Sure.
So as part of department consent decree that was drafted back in the 90s, before my time for sure. Tex Tech is required to run a pumping system that draws groundwater out at the edge of their facility. And the idea is that controls groundwater flow away from the Tex Tech facility, and is then protective. It actually captures water back from some of the residential wells across the street. So what it does is it tries to protect anything from leaving the Tex Tech facility that might impact those drinking water supply wells that are nearby.
so it's pulling fresh groundwater, uncontaminated groundwater
Yes.
in from the perimeter.
That's
So
correct.
it's a super constructive and helpful thing.
It's great, right? It's great. It's kind of way down the road. Will that solve our PFAS problems that we see here? Hard to say if that's a remedy that we'll use relative to the PFAS that we're seeing in the area. But either way, whether it starts to control some of that PFAS impact in the area or not, it's not going away tomorrow, right? This is still, even so, a very long-term problem.
How long is that well?
Excuse me. I have a question.
Yes, we'll recognize someone online. Roy, go ahead.
I have a two-part question here. In your research, have you made any differential discoveries between drilled wells and dug wells, one being deeper, one being more shallow?
So that's a really great question. We do have both drilled wells and dug wells here in the area that we've sampled. Far more drilled wells than dug, but we do see PFAS impacts in both drilled wells and dug wells here. But it looks like primarily the contamination is in the bedrock, and so affects more of the drilled wells. But excellent question. Yeah.
Okay. My second part here then is, we're talking about water and water contamination as a driving issue for this study and this movement. I'd like to add another consideration, and that's that for folks who have dug wells, we've noticed a lot more trouble going dry in the summers lately. When I first moved here back in 2000, we had marshland in my side yard. That is gone. Cat of nine tails, all that kind of stuff is gone. We're experiencing a lot more drought than I ever remember. And that affects those of us with dug wells that, we go dry about every summer now. Is that part of the planning process here anywhere?
That is actually a new take on this. Our primary focus on extending this public water supply has always been driven by making sure that folks have access to clean, affordable drinking water. Not to say that that's not an issue for folks in the area, but if we can get some additional benefits by allowing people who want to voluntarily connect to our system in the future, then that's great.
Well, I would see it as a support for those of us who end up with no drinking water at all. It's certainly a major consideration. So thank you.
Sure. Yeah. I think we had another question over here. Calvin, did you have something to add?
Pretty much forgot it. I remember.
Go back to the flow pump issue.
Okay.
Because as
I know what it was.
Oh,
How long have those flow pumps been in existence or working?
oh gosh, I think, since the nineties, I believe they went in. So for a while, and we did just go through an exercise where there's actually two of them. And we did some work where we balanced them out and tried to kind of optimize the capture of that system just this past summer.
And just for the reality check, it's important to acknowledge that the existence of these flow pumps is helpful to the people who are relying on well water in North Monmouth. The problem with these flow pumps is that the discharge is going into Wilson Stream. And so we have 12,000 parts per billion concentrations of PFAS diluted by Wilson Stream. And
all the water comes out of Tech Deck, goes in what they call the bionics.
Tell me more.
And it's pumped to a duct.
Yeah.
Nothing, the only thing that goes into the stream is just rainwater runoff from the roots and the sides. But
Oh,
anything
that's
that's pumped out of Tech Deck goes into there and all good and dust.
Goes to the POTW, right? Yep, that was my.
Then I stand corrected. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you
Yeah.
for correcting the record.
And this 12,000 parts per billion of PFAS means wells. This water is testing in.
The most recent test.
And I believe that's parts per trillion, so
Yeah.
I believe. Like I say, so kind of where in order of magnitude lower, that's not to diminish the fact that it's still quite high, right? Relative to what we see. It's not the highest I've seen anywhere, but it's certainly much higher than we would like it to be. Absolutely.
Okay.
So,
Part of this too is that unit also treats the water a little bit too. It takes some of the PFAS out, correct?
Well, actually, it's got an air scrubber on it.
Okay.
So what if that takes TCA up, it doesn't take PFAS stuff. The whole reason we pump the. I'm Joe Gary, by the way, I'm the plant manager at Tech Deck.
Thank you for being here.
I probably talked to a bunch of people on the phone off and on. We pumped those wells, two wells actually up on called W1, W2. And we started doing this remediation with working with the Maine DEP to take the TCA, it's trichloroethane they used to use in textile manufacturing for a lot of years. And so we understand there's an issue around Tech Deck, and we have this, try to keep the gradient flow staying that way, so keep it contained and also pumping it out into there. They have an air scrubber, because it's very, still, once you say air, you can dilute it a lot. It's like 98%, I think the last test we did,
Yeah, I
it just
think,
gets scrubbed out before it goes into the bionics. But PFAS either has to be filtered out or burned, right? Or the
well,
two.
yeah, it's very difficult. The whole country is really struggling on how to treat this stuff, but you're right, we can filter it out, we can concentrate it. Destruction technology is very difficult. It has to be very, very, very high heat. And so it's something that a lot of people are working on trying to solve right now. We don't have great answers.
I have a question for Mr. Gator and myself. What is the efficacy of these treatment systems that have been temporarily installed as we address the larger part of the problem? I'm assuming that they're difficult, as you mentioned, to maintain. And I noticed in the engineering proposal that other alternatives have been considered, the short loop, not the full loop, and a few other considerations like do nothing and leave these systems in place, which to me is not any kind of a long-term solution at all. But I know there's been some follow-up testing that your firm has done.
Yes.
And I'm not aware of any results that have come out of how well these treatment systems work. And
So,
how difficult they are to maintain and so.
yes,
Your system.
No, my unique situation is somewhat unique. I have no source of drinking water at all. It's just a deed and access to a shared well, which has received the treatment system. In the water. Thank you.
so I can answer some of your
Do these have a history?
questions.
Do these systems have a history?
Yeah.
It's relatively new technology.
No, they're actually old technology that are being repurposed in a way for PFAS. So these are carbon vessels. These are carbon treatment systems that we use to treat PFAS at most of our locations where we need to treat drinking water. So these are systems that we've used for years and years and years at our petroleum contamination sites. And in some cases, we size them up for the PFAS because the PFAS just are a problem at much, much lower levels, but they're very effective for removing the PFAS contamination. And so we've got hundreds of these at this point, hundreds, probably thousands installed around the state at this point, treating PFAS effectively. And you're right, there's been follow-up testing that Tech and their consultant has done to make sure that these treatment systems are working properly as designed, as intended, and providing people with clean, drinkable water. And we're very confident at this point that all the systems that have been installed are working properly.
Do we know how many gallons they're supposed to be able to treat the systems that we got? Nobody said anything to us, so I kind of done some research. And for a smaller system, they say 1 million gallons. I don't believe that, but maybe.
Well, are you asking, like, say before it would start to no longer treat the water?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's something I don't have a great answer for you, but what we'll do or what will happen is there will be periodic testing going forward, and that system will get tested at the different sample ports, right? So between the two filters that you have and after the two filters, and the point of that testing will be to detect when the PFAS starts to come through those filters and they need to be changed out. So the follow-up testing will make sure that your drinking water remains safe.
Yeah, I understand that, but
Okay. Yeah,
you know, it's like you go online to try and buy one of these,
yeah,
and you know, it's $2,500 or more,
right.
and they're saying 1 million gallons.
Yeah.
That seems like a lot of water through that little tank.
Well, I know
But,
that the engineers I work with wouldn't dare put a number on it. You know, there are so many factors there. The just general chemistry of your water, the concentrations of the PFAS, all of that really comes into play. So it's really difficult to put a real number on that. That's why we do the follow-up testing.
Exactly. We got flow meters on every one of them. and they're being tested every 6 months.
Yes.
To make sure though, because every house will be different, right? You're depending on what the makeup is, sediment. Yeah, so that's the plan. Then once then they get a routine in place, we can change them out when they should have made.
Yep, absolutely.
And so you're monitoring the water that comes, the treated water that comes out. And as it approaches the level of the interim standard, then you would say, okay, time for us to switch out
Time to
these
change.
filters and put in a new one.
Yep, absolutely.
Could you elaborate for us, someone, the cost of the types of filtration systems that are in North Monmouth, just so that folks have an idea of the expenses that we're talking about here?
These systems run about field day too, and they're around $4,500 to $4,700 a piece.
Per house.
Yeah, and then then to do the two, just about $300 a watt per test, and we're doing 2 or 3 per house every 6 months. Then you take the cartridges. I don't know what the cost is to replace the cartridge, and we'll figure that out pretty soon. But yeah, that's what we're pricing right now.
Okay.
Yeah, ends up being real cost. I mean, expensive in the long term, really is. Yeah.
Hey, other questions for Sean from DEP?
Just actually a couple. PFAS, are we still seeing it that it's a problem? I know it's a problem now, but I mean, are we contributing to this through an environmental process right now? Or is this something that's been there and we're now discovering? Because one of the things that I heard was that there was no sewage system back in the 50s. So is this all a result of not having a sewage system back then? And so therefore, at some point in time, we can see PFAS going away, or it seems that it's in everything that we use now. And so therefore, we're going to continue to have that issue with regards to PFAS.
Well, let's, in all honesty, a bigger question than is probably pertinent to our discussion here, but yes, I mean, there's two things going on there. You know, as far as what's contributed to the PFAS in the past, you know, there's a number of potential sources here, but even just leach fields and things could have been potential sources just with residential product use. And then are we contributing today to some extent for sure, but then there's being moves made to try to limit the amount of PFAS we're using too, so.
And the reason why I was asking that is that, again, kind of get back to one of my first questions is, do we need to look beyond what we're trying to do for North Monmouth and look at a greater picture with regards to what we need to do for Monmouth? You know, and I guess that's, I know that you can't answer that today, but I would hope that that's something that we need to have at least on our vision, that's something we need to consider, because from what my perspective is, this is not going away.
Well,
So
not
therefore,
anytime soon, absolutely. Yeah.
okay.
All right. We've been through the engineering questions and we've been through the DEP questions. Thank you, Sean.
Sure.
Next, we wanted to reserve some time for the Monmouth Water Association to say a few words about next steps. And so
Next steps.
I'll turn this over to Joel.
So this is an expensive proposition. Wish I could pull out my personal checkbook and write a check.
So do we.
I cannot. I cannot. We are looking in the range of $7 million to do this. There are multiple identified possible sources of grant money or loans. One of our next steps is to investigate what money we can find. Because if we were to put a system into North Monmouth, if all 120 people who were potential customers were to say yes, it would still be a pretty steep first water bill to get service. Many of you have been approached by, what was the organization? RCAP Solutions to fill out income surveys. Determining the income levels in North Monmouth is crucial for a number of possibilities for grants. If you have done it already, thank you. If you have a neighbor who has done it, thank them. If you or a neighbor that you know of has not done them, please reach out to Winthrop Utilities and they can help you connect to get that survey done.
I do have copies here tonight. If anybody needs.
What's the minimum number we need, Joel?
How many are we missing at this
I
point?
think we need 20 more, 25 more.
20 or 25 more from those potential customers. in that
Why
area.
are they so important?
Because if we have to have a certain number for it to be a representative
Sample, yeah.
sample. And depending upon the base income levels for the community, that could determine eligibility for 2 or 3 of the grant sources that are out there.
So millions of dollars of grants that would be available for a project like this is sitting on the table. And we suspect that North Monmouth would qualify based on census data. But to qualify for the grant, we need to have individuals. We can't just have data points. So we need to be able to point to individuals who say my income is X, so that we can apply for this grant in a successful way.
It's confidential too, although they have a list of people that haven't filled it out. When they fill it out, they put their address on the back, seal it. I don't see it. It goes to RCAP Solutions. They look at it and say, yep, this person sent it in, put it in the pile, and it all gets tabulated. So nobody's looking through saying, oh my God, he's making this much. That's not the point of this. It's all confidential. Nobody looks at it. Nobody sees it.
Yeah, and I was gonna email you this because I noticed that the governor has stepped up and provided more money for PFAS funding, so.
Yes.
Yeah, that was about $9 million or something like that, so.
Joel,
Yes,
surveys just encompassing North Monmouth.
correct. And just the people in the proposed service area for North Monmouth.
And this is because of the PFAS. So you can expand this and use these same kind of funds if you wanted to.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So, for example, if you wanted to expand it up 202 to include the group of homes that are on the other side of 202. You can include those because they not be, so it is strictly just associated homes with PFAS.
And it's gotta be in the study area. The funding agencies are pretty strict about that. They're not included in the study. They won't allow you to use money outside of the study area. That's part of the issue. If they were included initially, then it would be.
And we had to define our study area.
Right.
As we went forward with the engineering.
And this has been identified as the one.
This is identified as the hotspots. The town testing their fire station greatly increased the size of the sample area.
So did you test this fire station down the street?
They have domestic water down here.
That's right.
I mean, our water is tested on a regular basis.
Yeah, so the public water supply already serves the downtown area of Monmouth,
But not other areas.
not all of them. I think a couple of things are really important to take away here. Number one is, if you haven't filled out the income survey, please do. And if you talk to your neighbors, even if you're totally not interested in hooking up to the water system, doesn't matter. Filling out these survey forms is very helpful to your community because it will enable us to tap into a funding source that means we don't need to ask people to pay as much to hook up to the system.
It's for interest. People are interested as well as incomes, 2 purposes, right? Is that right, Ann? Yeah.
All right,
I
Joel,
have a question.
Yeah, Roy, go ahead. Hold on one second.
I remember getting surveys and filling stuff out, but how can I be sure that I filled out the one that you're talking about? Do you know, are you keeping track of who has or has not responded?
The agency doing the survey has that list.
Are they planning to reach out to the people who did not respond and do a second attempt?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
definitely.
Okay,
And it may be myself and Richard Robertson going around.
We're gonna go knock on doors.
Bang on doors.
We'll
Good
fill it out,
idea.
we'll steal the envelope and we won't see anything.
okay, thank you.
We want to get this done if we can, so, and again, it's all come down to economics at the end of the day.
So the other takeaway, and that's a great question, Roy, the other takeaway here is whether you live in North Monmouth or you don't, you might want to have your well tested just to know what you're drinking, if you're drinking from a well. Right? As I understand it, there's a new lab that just came to be in Norwich Walk that is, oh, yes, they are. I sent my samples in yesterday. So this new lab is offering very affordable pricing for retail one-shot deals. It was like $285, which I know it sounds a lot, but it's a lot less than it used to be, which was more like $400 or $500 if you went to Lewiston to get it done.
It's open.
Yeah, and I would strongly recommend that you protect yourself. Know what you're drinking. And to some degree, that will enable us to get our arms around what other problems we don't know about. When people start figuring out what their own situation is.
I have another question in that regard.
Go ahead, Roy.
The contamination, is that mainly through ingestion, or if you're not drinking the water, but you're taking a shower, for instance, is that still a problem?
So, yeah, great question. I'm gonna lead off by saying I'm not a toxicologist, right? Which are the kind of folks that think about these problems, but it's my understanding that it's ingestion, that you don't absorb these PFAS chemicals through your skin. That's
So if you're not drinking the water, you're probably safe, even if you're using it for other reasons?
yes, if you're not drinking it or cooking with it,
Okay.
then yes, you're probably taking care of most of the risk that you have. Yeah.
Thank you.
Paul, go ahead.
First of all, that gentleman alluded to other surveys. Just so you know, and he may know, the sewer district did conduct an income survey, I believe it was in 2018. That would have included North Monmouth because the sewer obviously is in North Monmouth. So we did a whole survey of the whole sewer system for basically look at this and have backup for grants and so on.
Yep.
So yeah, if people say to you, well, I did a survey, well,
That may be what they're thinking of.
it's now for this.
Right, right.
Now, the other question I have, I may know this, but, all right, so we get some grants, or the Water Association gets some grants and pays for it. And then you have to go out for certain loans. Is that loans or how is that going to impact existing Water Association members?
To be determined.
Yeah, to be determined.
We've got sort of a chicken and egg problem we're trying to solve simultaneously. Right? We don't know exactly, I mean, at least now, based on the feasibility study, we have an understanding of what the budget should be. The next step is for us to see to what degree we can get grants to pick up the cost of this. And based on that, we can go back and say, okay, how much, what is reasonable for a system user to pay, and to what degree can they afford to do that? We all need to be aware that some of the folks that are might be interested in hooking up to this public water supply ultimately are not folks that are responsible for the pollution. And if you left them alone, they'd be pretty happy just having clean water from their existing source. Now, that said, we live in the real world. And we're gonna do our very best to make this as affordable as we possibly can. We're gonna be smart about it. We've got some additional funds still left in the original allocation that the select board made for this feasibility study, and there's some potential there to hire a grant writer. There's some potential there to get ourselves organized so we can maximize the amount of grants and other free sources to make this as light a load as possible.
So there's a couple of funding sources. There's also the congressionally directed spending, the earmarks. They are going to do another round of that this year coming up. So if we are going to head in that direction, I would ask everybody to write a letter to Collins, King, everybody, because it does help. It definitely makes an impact. If they see the public outcry that this needs to happen, you will hit their radar screen. Because we can apply and if they're like, yeah, you know, that's a small community, they're not griping about it, they're not making too many waves. You may get overlooked, but it's there.
Yeah.
I want to go back to this survey again. If you haven't filled it out, please, if you know somebody that hasn't filled it out, take one and give it to them. But Dan and I and the folks out of Bangor that are running the survey, as soon as we can, we're gonna go knock on doors to see if we can get this thing further down the road. We said we need about 20, which is not too bad, but that's 20 doors we gotta knock on, which is probably 50, but I don't know. It just,
When was that first survey initially sent out? I know I responded to it.
October last year.
It seems like a year or so ago. And it was developed
September, or October of last year.
last year.
I think, yeah.
2022.
Yeah, if he set it out and they came twice to North Monmouth. Knocked on some doors. Obviously, there were people that weren't home at various times and other people, you know, so.
It just seems to me, I could be completely mistaken, but it seems to me, I remember getting a letter, a survey letter.
Yeah.
In the mail. Prior to last year sometime. So again, I can't trust my memory, but.
It may have been referencing to the sewer district. Because like I said, sewer district did a similar type of survey back in 2018. We may be following that.
Possibly.
Yes, sir.
But looking at stuff that's still in the planning in early stages, how long do they take to actually put the sewer line in the ground? Are we talking this coming summer or a year or two down the road?
If the engineers are still online, I could let them answer the question. If they've signed off, I can take an attempt based on their report.
I don't need an exact date. But I mean,
Yeah. John Kenny. John, you want to answer that question?
Still here. That was a question when for construction?
Yeah, what sort of time frame are we looking at?
Probably 2024. I would think if the funding all, you know, if you jump on the funding at this point and try to get funding lined up this year, the design drawings and I would think
Sure.
I would think
Number of steps. There's a permitting process. There's a whole
There is.
process.
Yeah, and what have we all got to do though to get this elevated to the top of the list, so to speak, to get this thing done, get it done economically?
Got to get the grants. You have to, for the senators and congressmen down in DC, that's where the money is. So when this application comes in, we may send out a blanket email or a blanket letter saying, hey, can you write a letter to support this? Because they're looking for those support letters. That's key. That's what they want to see, make sure the money's going.
Yeah, there are a variety of options here for funding sources that were listed in the report. And like you mentioned before, the income survey is really critical. And I talked to Kathy Rogers from, she was formerly from RCAP this morning. And she said there are 17 outstanding surveys that could come in. And the median income that you have to hit is about 58,000. And I believe based on the surveys now, you're around 65,000. So you're very close to that cutoff. So it's really important, I think, to get those additional 17 and see where you fall. But if you know, when you hit that median income of around 58,000, then that does open the doors for a lot of, principal forgiveness.
Sure, and we're talking about residents, we are not talking about property owners, so even folks who are renting a place in North Monmouth proper. Would count as an individual or as a household.
Yeah.
For the purpose of this survey.
Right, and it takes the median income of your survey amount, so I think it's really important to get those. The other one, like Dan mentioned, that there's it's called community project funding and congressionally directed spending, and that's where if you contact your congressional delegation and particularly this system related and having the PFAS contamination concern, I think would be a pretty good option for funding.
Sure.
But it does take that outreach, the public outreach, contacting your congressional delegation and so I think that would be a good shot for funding.
Thanks, John. Did you have a question, sir?
Somebody. So,
We've got, I'm sorry.
well, a couple other funding sources, just so you guys are aware. There's Northern Borders, that's $1 million if you're successful. Community Development Block Grant, which is tied to the income survey. That's up to $1 million. There's $2 million. So you're getting there, and then the state is putting money into this, so it's not out of the question to actually fund this thing.
So I was recently, we'll get to your question in just a second. I was recently up to the State House last week and had a chance to spend a few minutes with the chair of their PFAS committee up there. They have a special committee looking into PFAS issues. And the senator chairperson explained to me they're working on a number of initiatives this session. A lot of it, unfortunately, is focused on agriculture. But one of the initiatives that caught my eye, and I think that this is important for everybody in the room, is that of medical monitoring. That there's an initiative working through the insurance regulator that would allow for free blood testing for PFAS levels if you're living in a residence with a contaminated well. So that folks can get their arms around exactly what sort of personal problem they might have. And their, an estimate of their level of exposure. So that's not going to happen anytime soon, but is certainly an idea that's in the pipeline. And we should keep track of it for the next year or so. Question over here.
But that kind of leads into where my question was coming from. You talked about that you would like us to be able to do as much as we can. I was just wondering, this is not just Monmouth or North Monmouth, this is the state of Maine. And so therefore I was wondering, getting together as the state of Maine and contacting our senators and our representatives down there. And that should be done through the state level, saying, listen, this is what we're having. I don't know if any of that is going on because.
That is going on. We have lobbyists we deal with through different water associations. One of them just came back from DC and we're the talk of DC. They're trying to figure out why we're so high on PFAS and everybody else is low in the country.
Because I've been to a number of states over the last couple, and I talk to people about PFAS and people don't seem to realize it. And I'm so grateful for living in Maine because they really are concerned about this. And so it's good to hear that, but I mean, people, it's not going away.
And would it be helpful if we crafted a letter that could be sent to Washington? And have put it out there for people to use?
Yeah, it's a template.
It's a template, right? And they
Sign on it? People sign on it?
Yeah, and I don't think it should just be North Monmouth. I think it needs to be Monmouth. It needs to be the state that's saying, listen, you've got to do something about this. We need to be able to pay for these things and we shouldn't be having to pay for this all by our own.
Well, that's it. If they hear from you and that's the important issue from their constituents, then that's where the money's gonna go. they don't hear from you, they don't know this problem.
Squeaky wheel syndrome.
All right, Paul.
My understanding is if you don't meet the income threshold, like I think somebody said 58,000 now. But you're just slightly above it. You don't get a full one, at the 58,000 or less, you're gonna get 100% funding. If you're less than that, if we're higher than the threshold, we'll get a certain percentage reduction. Another thing, maybe 80% or 90%.
So we might be partially funded even though we might not
Yeah.
reach the minimum
That- I
threshold.
know that is how it works on the sanitary side. Now, the second part I have is that what threshold you say the project is a go? So when you have 50% funding, 60% funding, or are you gonna wait till 100%?
Still to be determined.
Well, it's gonna be based on who wants water, who's gonna take it. You have to calculate what the debt service is gonna be. I mean, there's a lot of factors.
Sure. Again, we're back at the chicken and the egg.
So who determines that? When does she determine? Is that the town level?
Actually,
Be the water
right now, it'd be the
association.
water association.
It would be the water association.
In conjunction with the town, because we may need to partner with the town on some of the grant process.
Right today in Monmouth, we're got a water pipe replacement program we've undertaken. And we're trying to get that started. We're looking at grant money and loans. And so we're trying to figure out, how much pipe can lay in the ground and still maintain reasonable rates. So it's a game we're playing.
Someone, actually, I think, Paul, you asked about the effect of beyond current members, and
Yeah.
it's to be determined. We could
That's
set up,
also a problem.
we could be setting North Monmouth up as its own department of, they could have their own rates. We don't know. It's just lots of pieces. I'm surprised no one asked about taxes. There would be a very small incremental increase to your taxes. It is very small.
In
Part of the-
Monmouth or in all of Monmouth?
In all of Monmouth. But that is because we provide the hydrants. And by law, a certain percent of our previous year's revenue, we get to bill the town towards the hydrants. If we were to suddenly have, say, 100 more accounts, we would have more revenue. So the hydrant fee to the town would go up. But having a hydrant is kind of a nice thing to have.
So part of our plan, and this is sort of the common sense part, is that if we're gonna put a water main in for the purpose of making sure that the residents have clean, affordable drinking water, at the same time, we would attach hydrants to the system and provide fire protection as well. And
That affects insurance rates.
it would affect insurance rates if you live in those neighborhoods in a positive way.
I did a little research on that, a couple of months ago. I talked to Dan about it. The water system with the hydrants will help you, but the biggest thing that helps you is the fire equipment that you have. That's what, I forget what that agency is that rates communities. What is it? ISO. It's the equipment the town owns that will impact your insurance rates more than it will be the hydrants. Mom's got good equipment.
So there's a number of benefits, residual things, kind of secondary things that go along with the potential for this system. Kelvin, were you about to raise your hand?
Yeah, but I was waiting for you to get done talking.
Go ahead.
Well, nobody's brought this up, but I've been talking to some of the neighbors. If I could get a list of who needs a sign, I could get them to sign. Just from Old Lewiston Road up to where I live on the corner on the main street. There's 11 people, 11 residents there, and 9 of them are all retired. So I think, and it's living on Social Security. So I think a person living on Social Security is gonna meet your threshold.
So what I'm hearing you say is, you're willing to volunteer to go around with Dan and knock on doors?
Yes and no. Anyway, but the big question that I'm getting when I'm going out and talking to these people about this thing is, you know, how much is it gonna cost? Is the water gonna be connected to my house? Or is it gonna be in the street and I gotta pay to connect it to my house? That is a huge question. And, you know, you gotta remember who these people are that are gonna pay the bill. They're retired.
And that is part of that chicken and egg. The more grant money we can get, the closer we can get to your house.
I think that one of the reasons people are reluctant to fill out income surveys, they're afraid who's gonna see the information. My understanding is that information goes to ARCAP. We do not see it. All we see is the one number or the average or
Yeah, the median.
got a median?
The
Okay,
median.
so we don't see it. I'd be sensitive about it too if I was filling out something and giving it to somebody.
Well, I remember when the letter came. Okay, it was some unknown company that nobody ever even heard of. Because we hadn't got the letter from Tex Tech yet. That said, these are people we're working with. So. I know why it didn't get answered. You know, it's because nobody knew who they were. And the problem was not a known problem at the time. It was very hush hush.
Yeah, it was emerging at the time. That's my recollection. That's why I was asking the gentleman when that survey was sent out.
Okay.
Because it seems to me that it was sent out prior to this expanded testing program and all of these results that have been compiled
Okay,
that are showing the severity of the problem.
so
Can I, when we started talking about putting water in North Monmouth, I didn't even know there was a PFAS problem over there. We've been talking about putting water in North Monmouth since we put the line in, and that was 22 years ago. That's why we got all these interconnects sitting on 202.
I understand that.
Right.
I understand that, but if you spent money putting in your well and you got a well that pumps out 10 gallons a minute, why would you be interested in this until you found out that, oh, somebody polluted my well somehow? Okay, so if the cards on the table all changed while you were playing the game. Okay, it's a whole different setup now. Now, I don't wanna, you know, I might have said something to upset you. I don't wanna upset you at all because Tex Tech is acted like a very good neighbor and they've taken care of all of us out there
Addressed it properly. We started.
right from the start.
Yeah.
And we appreciate it.
We do.
And they might not be even a person that caused it. Because we're talking.
No one knows.
7 years.
No one knows.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't.
we're here to move forward.
We're looking forward, right? We want to solve it.
Well, I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying.
Yep, yep.
You know, you couldn't have a better neighbor.
Agreed upon. Maybe, perhaps it might be a good idea to try this survey again. To make sure, or.
I'll get an updated list
If
from
you
her.
could beat a dozen of those things, I'll take them out there and.
Yep.
Get them fixed up.
I'll help you.
Thank you, Kelvin. All right, folks. Any other questions that we can answer? Now's your time. Yeah.
If this pipe goes past your home, are you going to be required to hook onto it?
No.
Easy answer.
Good.
Other questions?
Well, the caveat being the project may pay for the initial hookup. So if something happens 10 years. You have to pay for that yourself, but. Yeah, this is a fair.
Generally, Dan, systems like this, when they're put in, it goes right to the residents, right? Goes right into the.
I think CDBG, that's why we want to go to their funding source, because they would pay for on private property.
Okay.
Because normally we can't touch private property, but with the CDBG. That's what makes it better.
Other questions?
Well, kind of with that, and I kind of recollect our discussion when I was on the Water Association board. In Water Association being a private association versus being a municipal or a semi-municipal. How is that going to increase?
Well, they'd have to partner with the town.
Yep.
CDBG, they're eligible for SRF, they're eligible for a lot of the grants. I think Northern Borders would have to go to the town as well.
So, so far, that partnership seems to be working well between the select board and the Monmouth Water Association. And the reality is the Monmouth Water Association's been around since the 1970s. And they're 60s, forgive me. And they already serve what, 250? 220 homes, in Monmouth. So, I can't imagine that's gonna be an issue, but I'm one of 5 select members.
Positive thing, and I know from the sanitary district perspective, it would go a long way towards where the sewer system and the water association are now more equitably spread, and we can now, the sewer system can now begin to work on a volume-based rate. The only one you're not including in North Monmouth is Old Lewiston Road, east from the intersection. Well, I'd love to see you put that in there too. Then all of a sudden, the sewer district and the water association, North Monmouth are one and the same. Coverage wise.
Other questions? Well,
What's the average water bill? What's the average water bill in downtown Monmouth?
Hey, I'm a fan, see, my wife and I, okay, at home now, the kids are gone, and our base rate is 47, is it 44 or 45? And then we pay 380 something per 1,000 gallons. My water bill per year is around about $370, $380 per year. What that provides me, the water, the pressure, I don't have to run a pump, the testing, and repairs up to the curb stop.
Richard, the rate now is 423 per 1,000.
423, is that what it is? Yeah, it went up a little bit, right?
Call today because their addition on the bill was messed up. It's actually 447.
440.
Is that, I know we just changed it, but
The amount of 423, your base rate for a 5/8 inch meter is what, 44.
44 something, right? Yeah.
A month, a quarter.
A quarter, that's per quarter,
That's per quarter.
right?
Can we get another question here?
I know that it's not double, but if you did have 2 kids at home, what would you do?
220 somethings still at home, yeah.
Don't get rid of them.
But the base rate wouldn't change, it would just be the usage.
Yeah,
And that's per 1,000 gallons. So
I had 3 more people living in it. I pay roughly $100 a quarter.
$400.
In my building by the post office was $136 for the quarter. Okay, so we got four families living in there. You know?
you got people serving on the board here, we're all users, you have to be a user to be on the board, and we're pretty conservative people. And we don't have a lot of debt, all we owe today, Monmouth Water Association, we're very transparent, we owe $170,000, and that's it. We borrowed quite a bit of money when we put in the line from Winthrop, that was the 20th, we paid it all back. And that helps hold rates down by being reasonable, conservative, and representing the people who use this system. And Winthrop Utilities runs the whole thing for us. We don't have offices, we don't have employees, they run it all. We pay them monthly for manpower as well as water usage. Yeah. We have a pump station that sits just beside Wilson's Sporting Goods, and that's what pushes the water up to the reservoir.
And if you lose your power,
You lose your power, you got water.
you still have water.
Right. Because we have generators.
Even in an ice storm. Till it freezes.
We're audited because we have a loan from for rural development, so. Anybody wants to look at it, they can.
All right, any other questions? Oh, I've got something from Roy. Roy, is your hand up still?
Yes, I have a comment.
Sure.
Kent, members of the board, all the experts, this is great. Town government at work. I want to applaud you. Thank you.
It's not hard to do the right thing.
I want to thank.
Oh,
That was good.
happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Kept up to date on some of the progress of this on like in.
You can. So that's a really good question. So the question for those of you who might not have heard it is, how do you keep up to date with this process? And I would suggest that either the Water Association meetings or the select board meetings would be the place where you would look for updates on how we're doing. I'm also imagining that when we get farther down the road, there are going to be some opportunities for other public hearings, especially when we start talking about permit process and that sort of thing. Signing of large contracts, I think there'd probably be a public hearing and some votes that would go on about that. So it's a process. This is simply an early step in that process. And we'll look forward. If you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out to me or any of my colleagues on the select board. Of course, you can ever want to feel like your questions need to be answered, you can come and make a public comment at our select board meetings, which happen every other week.
The other thing I wanted to mention too is this select person right here has really stepped up and helped us get as far as we've gotten. Without his help, I don't think we'd be this far down the road, no question about it.
Thank you. All right, with that said, unless we have any other questions, and I will call this meeting closed. Thank you all for coming tonight.
Thank you.
One of those, I think I could. Without.